We're going to spend the next 10 to 15, depending on how long I decide to ramble, talking about the life of a professional flip chart jockey. And you said that joke wouldn't work. Nobody knows what a flip chart is. Killed it. All right. So, welcome to the obligatory second slide. This is the slide where the presenter lays out their bona fides, is why you should pay attention to them. Now that you know it, you will notice it everywhere. Everybody puts that on the second slide. I have been involved in what the fancy people now call event technology for the last 20 years. And I want to put this on here to highlight a little perception versus reality. One of these pictures is how our clients see us. One of these pictures is how we see ourselves. I'll let you decide which is which. The answer may surprise you. So, we're gonna start with the basics here to kind of get you up to speed on the whole complex world of event technology. But let's take a look at a very simple startup, and it's something that you're looking at right now. We have a source right at here, a laptop. We're running this through a projector, and it's pointed at a screen. Pretty simple, right? So, what happens when we take this very simple arrangement and we need to scale it up to something a little more complex? What does that process look like? But what exactly do I mean by complex? Well, let's say that instead of just one laptop, we have a couple. You know, we've got the presenter's laptop because they never go off of shared decks. They always want to prevent from their laptop. I say this is a shared deck. And the second laptop could be a sponsor role, a logo slide, something to switch to while we're changing out presenter decks. We're going to have some videos during the presentation, and we're going to project the speaker onto the screen because we're in a much larger space. And because we're in a much larger space, we're going to have to get rid of that tiny little meeting room projector. We're going to have to go with something a little beefier. Because it's a big room, we're probably going to need a couple. That tripod screen's going to have to go. We're going to need much larger screens. So we're done. We scaled it up. Mission accomplished. Let's hang a banner and go home, right? Not quite. Most of the challenge in scaling up a system like this lies in the red circle. This is kind of where most of the rest of this talk is going to be focused, because this is where all the challenges are, and we're talking about switching and signal distribution. So, let's go back, another look at our complicated setup. But let's say we can simplify it a little bit. We just need one source on the screen at a time. It's just going to be the presenter's very well-built slide deck is going to go up on the screen. And it's just going to be one source at a time. In that case, we can probably get by with a simple seamless switcher, like this one. This is the Pulse 300 from Analog Way, if you're into makes and models and things. And it's pretty indicative of switchers of this type. It's got 6 inputs of varying types, VGA, DVI, SDI, and one single output. And I'd say simple because you can choose one of the inputs and send it out that one output at a time. That's kind of what makes it simple. And what makes it seamless is, back in the olden days, when I first started, switchers they made hard cuts. You'd get like a little interruption in the signal as you cut between inputs, and it would be very jarring to everybody watching. But seamless switchers, it's a nice, even fade or wipe, or they have transitions. It looks very nice these days. That's what we call them, seamless switchers, and that's kind of how it is. And we control it, we configure it from this tiny little LED screen on the side. But it's very simple. We're picking output resolution, we can put up a test pattern, we're just configuring inputs. It's very simple to configure and run. But what happens if our system's a little more complicated? We're going to have the same PowerPoint presentations on the screens, but we're going to have more screens. We want to be able to put IMAG of the presenter on another screen in the room. And IMAG is AV tech lingo for image magnification. It's when we put the presenter on the screen so you can all see him. or her, or them, whatever. So we have multiple inputs going to multiple outputs. So we need a different switcher. We need what's called a matrix switcher. This is the Ascender 48, also by Analog Way. And before you ask, I don't actually own stock in this company. This is just, my employer buys this brand of switchers, so it's the one I'm most familiar with, but it's very indicative of the kind of matrix switchers that you will encounter if you should choose to chuck the very well-paying, good hours world of technology and come with us to the very low-paying, long hours world of AV stuff. It's got 12 inputs of even more types. This one we've got DVI, we've got HDMI, we've got SDI plugs all over the place, we've got even full DisplayPort, and we've got 12 of those. And we also have 4 outputs, 4 individual outputs. And we call it a matrix switcher is because each one of those 4 outputs can handle a separate source all at the same time. So we can use one of those outputs for the slide deck. We can use another output for the camera, which leaves us 2 outputs for downstage monitors, you know, the monitors that we put on the floor so the presenter can see their content without having to look back at the screen, like I'm constantly doing. We call them DSMs or confidence monitors or doghouse monitors. Catch me after the event and I'll tell you why we call them doghouse monitors. We can all these configurations for whatever we need to happen on show site. And they tell me that you can run this entire box from this tiny little screen and these buttons on the front. I believe them because they are professionals, but I prefer to use this. This is the live control interface for the Ascender, something Analog Way calls WebRCS. It's just web remote control software. It's actually a Java application that runs in a web browser on a laptop attached to the machine via Ethernet. Or, horrifyingly, you can do an access point connect wirelessly to your giant event switcher. And more on that later. A quick tour. We've got 12 inputs. These 12 are our sources. We've got our outputs along the top. Those are the things labeled screens. In the center here, these are there's the layer configurations for each of our outputs because this box can do layers. You can take any of the inputs, and for each output, layer those sources on top of each other to get something that looks like this. Now, anybody who was at DevOps Days Minneapolis this past summer saw something that looked very like this. We used an Ascender to create what was going on the main screen for all the presenters. Sidebar, DevOps Days Minneapolis this year, July 25th and 26th. Tickets are on sale now. We've sold how many?
We have probably at least 300 tickets left.
Okay, 300 tickets left. We're about halfway, a little less than halfway, and the CFP is open until the end of the month. So get your submissions in before Bridget just tells you you're speaking, which happens a lot. So back to this. Basically what we do here is we have 3 layers over this single image. We've got a background layer of the Hennepin Avenue Bridge. We've got the presenter's slide deck on the side, and we've got a little picture-in-picture in the other corner of the presenter. We did this all in this magic box. Now, quiz time. So you've seen some of the capabilities of this magic box. What operating system do you think it's running? Shout it out. I actually heard it. It's horrifyingly Windows XP. Good. Do you work in AV, sir? All right. Well, it's a good guess anyway. Yes, horrifyingly, these boxes run on Windows XP. Which is why the putting an open wireless access point on this thing and just opening it up to the web is an awesome decision you should all make today. So that's a little bit about switchers. Now let's talk about signal distribution. Back in the olden days when I first got into this racket, the maximum resolution that we could do with a projector was 12 by 8. It was 1200 by 800. It was whatever that is, SXGA or WXGA, I forget. So we were fine with VGA cable because we can run 100 feet of VGA cable all across the ballroom, and we didn't really have to worry about signal dropout. If we decided to tack on a 25-foot extension, the most that would happen was the signal would get a little fuzzy because it was an analog signal, because we're dealing with VGA, it's all analog. So we were pretty okay with that. And then HD happened, and meant dealing with HDMI, which is great for your living room, but really shitty when dealing with a large event. And most of the challenges that we encounter in this aspect of signal distribution is dealing with the fact that you can only run an HD signal about 50 feet before you get signal dropout. And it's not just a fuzzy picture the way analog would be, because it's ones and zeros. It's either there or it's not, which is awesome. So the manufacturers in their infinite wisdom have come up with many different solutions for dealing with sending high definition images a long distance. And they all work for varying degrees of work, but they all have trade-offs based on your tolerance for pain. We've got DVI over Cat6, which is great, but it gets a little wonky if the Cat6 cables are longer than 250 feet. We've got HDMI over fiber, which can run really long. You can do 300-foot runs of HDMI over fiber, but it's fiber optic cable, which means it's glass and therefore very, very fragile. If you've ever worked in one of these large AV production things, you have banquet people bringing in tray jacks and large dollies full of tables, running them over your very expensive, very fragile HDMI cables. They are also unidirectional because evil exists in this world. So you can run your 300 feet of HDMI cable, grab the ends and go, fuck. And then we have HDSDI, which the cables are more robust, and you can run really long lengths, but you're still dealing with a transmitter box and a receiver box on either end, which, more equipment, more chances for something to go wrong. Let's see, where was I going from here? Oh yeah. So Bridget found this for me. I think this is a very truthful thing for standards when we're going to move on to this. I brought props. This is a short list of the laptop adapters that I travel with to shows on a daily basis. Yes, I will hold so you can take your picture because this was your idea. So we have all sorts of adapters because I'm convinced that laptop manufacturers convince themselves that their shiny new thing is going to be the new standard. So we get things like full display port, mini display port, micro and mini HDMI. Has anyone seen a laptop with micro and mini HDMI? Yeah. Yeah. And yet, that one time, somebody shows up with a Samsung laptop, and you don't have the micro HDMI out, and that's the only output they have from their laptop, you are boned, my friend. Boned. But let's talk about Macs, because Macs are not immune. And anybody that was here early saw how not immune they are. Macs have their own special implementation of high bandwidth digital content protection, also known as HDCP. The way Macs handle HDCP is the laptop goes looking when you plug it into one of its digital outputs, whether it's the DisplayPort or the HDMI out. It goes looking for an HDCP connection. And if it finds it, like if we plug it into one of our switchers, it says, great, it encrypts all of the output from that output, whether it's protected content or not. So iTunes movies, stuff like that, encrypted because they should be encrypted because it's protected content. But your presentation is not protected content, and yet it is encrypted. So we get to the switcher, we're good. Then we move it to, might be a slightly older projector or a projector with DVI, nothing. Not for love nor money will that Mac send a signal to that projector, because it's encrypted all the way along, and then you spend your day pounding your head against the table. I'm also at this point supposed to insert a joke about Linux on the desktop. Wow. I didn't think it would work, but you were right. I didn't even have to make the joke, I just had to mention the joke. But seriously, this is the year of Linux on the desktop, right? And Slashdot said that in '99, and I'm sure it's still valid. So, but the thing is, if the Mac doesn't receive, if it sends out that HDCP request and doesn't receive it back, it leaves that output unencrypted. So the manufacturers have come up with a solution. On the switchers and things, they just make sure that that Mac doesn't receive an HDCP response. So we do things like, and I'll blow it up so you can see it. Down here on the bottom, it has a toggle for HDCP enable, disable. So it disables the Mac sending the signal along to any of the other things plugged into that switch. It disables HDCP, so you could actually use your Mac, which is handy. So in the time that I have left, we're going to go over a couple of cool tricks that you can do with these very, very specialized Windows XP boxes. Now, if you've been to any large conferences lately, you've probably seen something like this. This is something, you achieve this effect by something that's called edge blending. Basically what you're doing is you're taking two or more projectors, butting them up against one another, overlapping them slightly, and we'll get to that, to produce an image, a single image, that's wider than the resolution of either of the projectors. So this one was from a conference we went to in Budapest called Craft, which is awesome, you all should go, because it's great. And they have this 15 by 45 foot screen, 15 tall, 45 wide. And it's using two projectors to achieve one image. And the switcher is basically what you use to create that. But how about some math? One of the important figures that you need to provide to the switcher in order to make all this work is the amount of pixel overlap of the two projectors, because you overlap them slightly. And the way you calculate that overlap is this right here. It's basically you take the horizontal resolution of both of the number of projectors to get your total pixels available. And then you get the pixels required for the image by taking, because we're working with a 3:1 aspect ratio. It's a 15 tall by 45 foot wide screen. So it's 3:1. We take the vertical resolution of your projector, which in this case is 1080, because it's 1920 by 1080, it's HD projectors. And you times that by 3, because it's 3:1. And you get 3240 for a blend zone of 600. So you overlap those projectors by 600 pixels each, and then the switcher does little calculations. It actually dims, because you tell it it's 600 pixels, it dims the image 600 pixels from the end of each of those images, kind of stitches it together, does some other complicated things, and you get an image like this. And you can sort of see, and I was sort of a dick and I took this from the side where it's a little more obvious, that you can see the blend zone right in the center of the screen. That's where the projectors overlap, and that's why you get that. You get in, and I'm gonna cut these guys some slack because this was in a Soviet-era railroad station. And so it's not the most controlled environment to be doing this sort of thing, and they're doing some things behind the screen that you probably shouldn't be doing, using short throw lenses and rear projection to start with. So you end up with a little more visible blend zone, but it's nice for illustration to see. Yeah, you can end up with a blend zone. So I was told that I have to tell the air conditioner story. So this is a story about the importance of testing. And this has to do with this setup that I showed earlier. This is a setup that happened that my company did earlier this year. And the center screen is a 15 by 45 foot blended image. And we spent 2 days getting this blend just right. They had some problems, and they were actually doing, not to bore you with details, but it's actually 4 projectors, 2 stacked on either side, and those are converged and then blended. So they finally got it working. And the 2 days to set up to get all this working. And then we're like, great, okay, we've got it. We're gonna turn on the air conditioning to let people into the room. They turn the air conditioning vents on right in front of the screens, and the air from the air conditioning pushed the projection fabric back, completely ruining the blend. And this was 45 minutes before people were going to come into the thing to start this giant event. And so this is a lesson on testing your equipment in as close to production environment as you can. Okay, so wrapping up here. One other cool trick that you can do, and I'm just going to let this play because it's a little long, is something called projection mapping. It's basically taking a two-dimensional projected image, projecting it on a three-dimensional object. And where most people see this sort of stuff, anybody been to a wild game? Okay. Don't all yell out at once. This kind of technology gets used a lot in hockey arenas for player introductions. And I'm going to let this play on as I talk over it. So basically what they're doing, it's kind of a mix of technologies I was talking about. It's a blended image. It's basically there are projectors mounted in the ceiling pointed down at the ice. And it's probably at least 4, probably more like 8 or 12. And they're all converged, they're all blended to make a seamless image, and then they use something like Archaeos or Resolume to map their projected image on top of the hockey arena to create effects like this. I see they can do very cool, like 3D things. I've seen, there's YouTube videos of this all over the place. There's ones where it's like the ice rink is on fire and they have like a skater skating around it. It's, they use this for player introduction. It's very cool. And this is just going to go on. This is like a 4-minute video, but I'm not going to show it all. So, wrapping up, to give you a few takeaways from something that might not be completely applicable to your world, tools for some cases may be ill-suited as complexity increases. Some of our smaller projectors or our smaller screens might not work if we're scaling up to a giant event. Like ops, AV isn't noticed until something goes often spectacularly wrong. And I like this quote. I wish I had had my brains about me and was able to tweet it when Allspaw said it to me. AI is easy, AV is hard. So that's my time. Thank you. Oh, and don't drop the mic. It's rude, and those mics are expensive. Thanks.